Upat ka travel tips nga angay pagasundon. Kinahanglan sa nimo mag-ipon og travel fund. Likayan ang pagpangutang para lang ipang travel. Mag-book og flight panahon sa seat sale. Ug ang labing importante, likayan gayod ang travel now, pulubi later. Upat ka travel tips nga angay pagasundon. Kinahanglan sa nimo mag-ipon og travel fund. Likayan ang pagpangutang para lang ipang travel. Mag-book og flight panahon sa seat sale. Ug ang labing importante, likayan gayod ang travel now, pulubi later. Upat ka travel tips nga ang...
Mind you, tay, mula pusgid ang kasakit sa akong abaga. Nakinibawaan nga haplas ani.
O maring-an, ang kasangga nako sa aray, Omega Painkiller. Haplas silang o parihas kadako sa piso, mawala dayon ang sakit sulod sa 30 segundo.
30 segundo? Sulayan daw nako. Ay, nawala gid ang sakit. Salamat Maring Judy. Naa na jud ko'y kasaligan sa akong kada aray. Mabatagan gid ang bisa sa Omega Painkiller.
Methyl salicylate plus camphor plus menthol is the generic name of Omega Painkiller. If symptoms persist, consult your doctor.
Omega Painkiller works in as fast as 30s. Kasangga saray.
Para sa mas kumpletong pakikinig ng music, entertainment, news, and information.
Meron yan dito sa Bombo Radyo. Dahil nandito ang music station ng Bombo Radyo Philippines, ang Star FM.
Sa Mindanao, makinig sa 96.3 Star FM Davao, 93.3 Star FM Dipolog, 93.9 Star FM Zamboanga, and 93.7 Star FM Cotabato.
Kahit saan sa Pilipinas at maging sa ibang bansa, lagi mong kasama ang Star FM.
Dahil hindi lang kami sa radyo mapapakinggan, live din tayo sa Bombo Radio Philippines mobile app at sa Facebook.
Kaya Star Nation, kung musika at impormasyon ang hanap mo, no worries.
Dahil sagot yan ng Star FM, the music station of Bombo Radio Philippines. Para sa mas kumpletong pakikinig.
Serving the Philippines and the world with music and information. Broadcasting from Davao, 96.3. 96.3.
The Philippines #1 Star FM.
Serving the Philippines and the world with music and information. Broadcasting from Davao, 96.3. 96.3.
The Philippines #1 Star FM.
Serving the Philippines and the world.
This one, if it keeps up like this, is keeping Crawford trying to go a little bit deeper. Cannot stand here. One-eye exchange. He's not backing up from Canelo's power. Good uppercut by Crawford. Now was at the range on the return. This is a significant statement Crawford is making if he continues this way. Not only is he not backing up from Canelo's power, but he may be.
Magandang umaga, Sir Nation, Philippines Standard Time. It is now 2 minutes after 9 o'clock in the morning. At narito na ang ating top of the hour news. Humihirit ang Department of Transportation ng hanggang 2 billion pesos sa susunod na taon na para mapanatili ang active transport projects at magkaroon ng long-term bike lanes. Ayon kay Transportation Undersecretary Mark Steven Pastor, nahihingi sila sa Kongreso ng nasabing halaga para sa 2026 National Expenditure Program. Una kasing humingi ng active transport sector ng 69.38 million pesos. Naniniwala ang opisyal na maaaprubahan ito ng mga mambabatas. Maraming mga bike lanes ang plano ng DOTR na itayo at lagyan ng end-of-trip facilities gaya ng shower areas na makakatulong sa mga empleyado na magbisikleta patungo sa kanilang mga trabaho. Time check on Philippines Standard Time, it is now 4 minutes after 9 o'clock in the morning. At sa ibang balita naman, ipinahayag ng Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board o LTFRB na hindi makakaapekto ng malaki sa public mobility ang nakatakdang transport strike ng pagkakaisa ng mga samahan ng tsoper at operator nationwide o PISTON sa Huwebes, September 18, 2025. Ayon kay LTFRB Chair Teofilo Guadis III, handa ang mga ahensya ng gobyerno tulad ng Department of Transportation, Metropolitan Manila Development Authority at mga lokal na pamahalaan na magpatupad ng mga contingency measures upang matugunan ang posibleng abala sa mga commuter. Kaugnay nito, magbibigay din ng libreng sakay ang pamahalaan tulad ng military trucks, buses, at mga modernized public utility vehicles upang matulungan ang mga apektadong pasahero. Gayon din ang pagkakaroon ng mga alternatibong ruta at karagdagang mga sasakyan. Samantala, ipinanawagan naman ng LTFRB na magkaroon ng dialogo ang mga transport groups sa pagkakasa ng mga kilos protesta upang maiwasan ang abala sa publiko. Time check on Philippines Third Time. It is now 5 minutes after 9 o'clock in the morning. Samantala, sa balitang sports naman, umaasa si Mexican boxer Canelo Alvarez na pumayag ng rematch si US boxer Terence Crawford. Kasunod ito sa pagkapanalo ni Crawford ng unanimous decision sa kanilang welterweight title fight. Sinabi ni Alvarez na isa ng kasaysayan ang nasabing laban at magiging maganda pa ito lalo kung maulit at handa itong lumaban. Napaiyak si Crawford nang inanunsyo ni Michael Buffer na ito ay nagwagi kung saan pumabor sa kanya ang mga judges matapos ang 12 rounds. Pinuri ng dalawa ang isa't isa dahil sa pinamalas nilang lakas sa boxing ring. Itinuring rin kasi na ito ang pinakamalaking boxing match na ginanap sa US mula ng talunin ni Floyd Mayweather si Manny Pacquiao. Ang 37 anyos na si Crawford ay naging world champion sa 5 division at siya rin ang unang lalaking boksingero sa 4-belt era na kinoronahan na undisputed champion sa 3 weight classes, ang junior welterweight, welterweight at super middle welterweight. Ito rin ang unang pagkakataong natalo ang 35 anyos na si Alvarez sa super middleweight sa loob ng 12 fights. Mayroong record si Alvarez na 63 na panalo, 3 talo at 2 draw na mayroong 39 knockouts, habang si Crawford naman ay mayroong 42 wins, wala pang talo at mayroong 31 knockouts. Time check on Philippines Third Time. It is now 7 minutes after 9 o'clock in the morning. Samantala, mga Kusur Nation, 101 days left before Christmas Day.
It's a time for sharing, giving gifts for everyone. What matter now is this Christmas we share love.
At yan ang kabuuan ng ating Top of Your News ngayong umaga. Hatid sa inyo ni Star DJ Jam mula sa impila ng 96.3 Star FM.
The top of the hour
Manjo
news.
tay, mula pusgid ang kasakit sa akong abaga. Nakinibawaan nga haplas ani?
O maringan, ang kasangga nako sa aray, Omega Painkiller. Haplas silang o parihas kadako sa piso, mawala dayon ang sakit sulod sa 30 segundo.
30 segundo? Sulayan daw nako. Ay, nawala gid ang sakit. Salamat Maring Judy. Naa na jud ko'y kasaligan sa akong kada aray. Mabatagan gid ang bisa sa Omega Painkiller.
Methyl salicylate plus camphor plus menthol is the generic name of Omega Painkiller. If symptoms persist, consult your doctor.
Omega Painkiller works in as fast as 30s. Kasangga Saray.
Oops! Star Nation, huwag kalimutang mag-like, mag-share at syempre, mag-follow na rin para sa mas marami pang ganap. Mapabalitang man yan, mapaimpormasyon at mapachikahan. With Star FM, deserve mong maging updated at magkaroon ng bonggang good vibes because it's all for you. Thanks for watching!
Keep an eye on them, would you? I can't, sire. Why not? Because they use NordVPN. How would you like to spend 12 hours a day on your favorite website ever without the fear of your data being stolen? Then you need NordVPN. NordVPN has thousands of secure servers in 59 countries, allowing you to safely surf the net at the fastest possible speed, while staying away from online threats thanks to the anti-malware tool, CyberSec. NordVPN comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee, and now you can take advantage of their new password manager, NordPass, and new encrypted cloud storage solution, NordLocker. NordVPN lets you search for better deals in other territories and unlock content not available in your country, like some oversimplified videos, for example. It's incredibly easy to use. With just a click of a button, you can head up to Canada and watch some sweet Canadian TV, just like that. Go to nordvpn.com/oversimplified to get a 2-year plan plus 1 additional month with a huge discount. That's nordvpn.com/oversimplified. And as always, you'll be supporting my channel. So thank you. Now where were we? Oh yeah. Crossing the Alps, defeating the Austrians, and Europe at peace. What a meteoric rise it had been for the young Corsican. He had just taken charge of a nation that appeared to be losing a war and turned it all around, securing French gains in Europe. But there was now a big question. You see, throughout the chaotic French Revolution, French governments had struggled to keep the economy afloat. They often didn't have a whole lot of support, and they frequently came and went. Would Napoleon finally be the man who could stick around? Military victories were one thing, but could the general also govern? Spoiler alert. Yes. The economy's crumbling? Well then why don't you have yourself a new national bank, currency reform, and improved taxation and welfare systems? The legal system is an incoherent mess? Well then why don't we nicely wrap all those civil laws up into one new centralized legal code? Corrupt government officials? Throw them in the trash. Bad infrastructure? Throw it in the trash. Women's rights? Throw them in the trash. Wait, really? Well, yeah, unfortunately, while Napoleon was building on the equality of the revolution, he also largely scaled back rights for certain groups, and husbands had full legal control over their wives. But come on, ladies, maybe let men have a slice of the pie for once, okay? Napoleon further reformed education, ensuring a system based on individual ability, meaning now Simeon had to compete with everyone else, and Napoleon could get the cream of the crop to help him run the republic. But he wasn't just building on the ideas of the revolution. The revolution had led to a lot of chaos, and Napoleon needed stability. So he rolled back a couple things, most notably with religion. The revolution had pretty much kicked the Catholic Church to the curb, but Napoleon understood that since many French citizens still considered themselves Catholic, that could be a problem. So he came to an agreement with the Pope and brought back the Church, only this time with some pretty hefty power limitations. He also ensured freedom for other religions, and is often noted for his positive treatment of Jewish people at a time of widespread anti-Semitism. But while all of this may make Napoleon sound like a pretty stand-up dude, it's good to note that he believed in religious freedom because he thought it was a powerful tool to keep the poor from eating the rich. Or something like that. Overall, Napoleon's aim was to end the chaos of the revolution and finally create a stable and prospering French republic. And in that aim, he seemed to be largely successful and generally popular with the people of France. He officially declared that the revolution is over, adding, "I am the revolution." Napoleon's head could be seen for miles. Of course, not everyone was happy with Napoleon's reforms. Conservatives felt he was too radical. Radicals felt he was too conservative. But since Napoleon was a dictator, opposition could usually be stamped out with some good old-fashioned iron fisting. In 1804, Napoleon took one last major step. After some failed attempts were made to assassinate him, he wanted to strengthen his position and ensure his dynasty could live on after him. And so he decided being first consul for life simply wasn't quite enough. He decided he should become emperor. He held a vote, asking the French people if they were cool with the idea, and they returned a definitely not rigged 99.9% in favor. The ball's on this man. And so on the 2nd of December, 1804, in an elaborate ceremony at Notre Dame, Napoleon was made emperor. The Pope was even invited to attend, and normally he would crown an emperor. But to make sure everyone knew this wasn't some Charlemagne-style circular power division, Napoleon lifted the crown and placed it on his own head. Like I said, the ball's on this man. He was now Emperor of the French. Well, Napoleon, you were a general, then you became first consul for life, and now you're an emperor. Is it enough yet? Is your ambition finally satisfied? I don't know, Pierre. What comes after emperor? I would say God, sire. You want to be a god? Yes. I'll put it down under maybe. Okay, everyone. What the hell is going on? This Corsican guy showed up out of nowhere, and he's kicking our ass. He's exporting the ideas of the French Revolution wherever he goes, and he just declared himself King of Italy and Emperor. He can't do that. I'm the Emperor. Oh, hey, fellow monarchs. I see you're having a monarch party. My invite must have got lost in the mail. I'll just set up a spot right here. Wow. You don't belong here, Napoleon. We're coming to take you down. I'd like to see you try. Oh, I'm so scared I just pooed my pants. Hey, everyone. I just pooed my pants.
Ang laki mo na! May king size pala? One enemy remaining. I got two. One enemy remaining.
What the? Bro.
No, but I did just poo my pants. Before Napoleon had even declared himself emperor, the British had already redeclared war on France because both sides had been violating their previous treaty. Napoleon immediately occupied Hanover and then began making plans for a great British invasion, partially paid for by selling a huge chunk of land to the United States. Napoleon gathered his army along the English Channel, but here was the problem. While Napoleon's powerful army would almost certainly obliterate the British on land, there was very little chance he'd actually make it across the Channel, because Britannia ruled the waves. This power dynamic would keep the two traditional enemies from engaging in much real direct combat throughout the Napoleonic Wars. However, the British had something else up their sleeve: copious amounts of money. They were willing to throw cash at anyone who would go to war against Napoleon, and there were plenty of takers. Austria, Russia, Naples, and Sweden, hoping to put Napoleon's France back in its place, formed a third coalition against France. The coalition forces probably thought that this time they stood a chance. They weren't prepared for the total humiliation they were about to suffer. The War of the Third Coalition was Napoleon at his best. We've already learned two ways in which Napoleon was a great military commander, but here comes one of the biggest reasons: speed. He had reorganized his army into corps, which were themselves basically small armies. Each had their own infantry, cavalry, and artillery, and as a result, was able to act more independently. They spread out through the countryside, and by living off the land rather than relying on heavy supply trains, they were able to move extremely quickly. Napoleon would traverse massive distances, outmaneuver his enemies, isolate them, and then move in for the kill before they even knew what was going on. Lightning warfare leading to total destruction. Would you like to see him do it? Here we go. Part of the coalition's plan was for the Russians to meet up with the Austrians and take on Napoleon together. Combined, they could turn the tide against him, so Napoleon needed to stop them from ever meeting. But he's all the way over in Boulogne. No problem. In a matter of weeks, Napoleon marched 200,000 men, in secret, encircling Austrian General Mack and capturing his entire army. A devastating blow. Napoleon later remarked, "I have destroyed the Austrian army by simply marching." Next, he turned to face the approaching Russians. Okay, it looks like the French are coming for us, but check this out. I've got an amazing idea. When they approach, we run away. Sir, you're a genius. The Russians began to retreat with Napoleon giving chase, and since his tactics relied on quick victories, this could be a problem, especially because the longer the war went on, the more likely it looked other countries may join the coalition against him. But Napoleon knew the Russian Tsar, Alexander I, was young and seeking glory, so he came up with an idea to lure him in. He sent him a message. What does it say? It says, "Hello, I'm just a little baby boy, and I'm very scared." Are you talking like that, or is he? He is, sir. Why is he doing that? I don't know, but it's very cute, helpless, and vulnerable. A little baby boy, eh? Very scared, eh? Cute, eh? Boris, get my crossbow. We're going hunting. The Allied forces turned to face Napoleon, who they now believed was in a vulnerable position. He was set up at Austerlitz, and to make it look like he was retreating, he had even evacuated the high ground. A thick fog set in, obscuring Napoleon's center, as the Allies took the bait and set up on the heights. From there, they spotted Napoleon's very weak-looking right flank, and they descended the heights to go get it. Little did they know, it was exactly what Napoleon was hoping they'd do. The next thing they knew, a large French force was emerging from the fog, launching a huge central assault up the hill. They swung around, crushing the Allies, and as men attempted to flee across the frozen lakes, Napoleon ordered his artillery to fire on the ice, causing an unknown number to drown. But he told me he was just a little baby boy. What happened? He tricked you, sir. You mean I was the little baby boy all along? It was Napoleon's masterpiece, and Austria were once again forced to make peace with France. Then, with the French conquest of Naples in 1806, the War of the Third Coalition ended as yet another Napoleon victory. This was the third time Napoleon had had to give Austrian Emperor Francis a good spanking. And so, with the peace treaty in 1805, Napoleon was determined to punish him. He was forced to give up territory, hand over significant compensation, and promised never to fight Napoleon again. For now, Russia, Sweden, and the UK remained at war with France, but none were able to offer much of a threat. And so, Napoleon got to work strengthening his grip over Europe. He gave out rule of captured territories to his family and friends, and most notably, he established a new confederation in Germany, with himself as its protector. Seeing his influence in Germany being wiped away, Emperor Francis acknowledged reality and officially dissolved the Holy Roman Empire, an entity that had existed for over 1,000 years. But it wasn't all good news for Napoleon. For one thing, Spain had earlier allied with France in 1804 because the British just couldn't help themselves from blowing up Spanish ships, and Napoleon hoped a combined French-Spanish fleet would eventually be able to invade England. Unfortunately, he received word that British Admiral Nelson had engaged his fleet at Trafalgar. Normally, naval battles looked like this, but in this case, Nelson did this. Was it because he was an idiot? No. It's because he was a genius. He successfully punched through the Franco-Spanish line and unleashed hell. His victory ensured British control of the sea, and his death during the battle
Lucky Me Pansit Canton Kasalopak. Busog na, sarap pa.
made him a legend. Napoleon's hopes for a future British invasion were gone. But not just that. Napoleon was also hoping to secure peace on the continent, but that wasn't looking likely because the Prussian king was under pressure from his wife. Frederick, he's established a confederation in our turf, and he told us he'd give us Hanover, but then offered it to the British. You have to declare war on him. What is it with you and war? What is it with you and being a cupcake? Go to war! Okay. In October 1806, Prussia, with its famed military tradition, joined the coalition and declared war, beginning the War of the Fourth Coalition. Unfortunately, Prussian King Frederick William III wasn't the smartest tool in the shed. Look at him over there, being all French. Makes me sick. Boys, we'll get him this time. But here's the thing. This time, we have to stick together. Do not under any circumstances face Napoleon by yourself. You all saw what happened to Austria. Hey, where'd Fred go? Hey, you jerk. Think you're some kind of big shot? Huh? Wanna tango with Fred? You don't got the cojones. We're screwed. Without consulting its allies, Prussia had gone ahead and sent Napoleon an ultimatum, demanding he move all his forces out of Germany. Now, some of you watching this video probably can't even wipe your own bum yet, but even you know you don't just send Napoleon an ultimatum. Obviously, Napoleon went in for the kill. Prussia's army was quite outdated, so when they met Napoleon at the twin battles of Jena and Auerstedt, it wasn't even close. Even Marshal Davout's heavily outnumbered corps at Auerstedt sent the Prussians running, and Napoleon carried out a ruthless pursuit of his fleeing enemy, taking Berlin and within a single month decimating the Prussian forces. Frederick William and the remnants of his army moved to the east. At this point, Napoleon's forces were pretty tired. Winter had come, and conditions were miserable. He anticipated both sides would settle into winter quarters, but Russia decided to try their hand at an unexpected winter attack. A series of brutal battles followed that took a heavy toll on both sides, including the vicious Battle of Eylau, fought in blizzard conditions. Men froze to death, and many deserted. The Russian artillery tore the French to shreds, and Napoleon himself was momentarily under risk of being captured. In the end, the French army was saved thanks to a legendary cavalry charge by Napoleon's flamboyant cavalry commander, Murat. After the horror inflicted on both sides, they decided it might be a good idea not to do any more fighting until after winter. Then, after winter came, and the fighting continued. the Russians were pushed back to Friedland, where Russian General Bennigsen made a bit of a blunder by positioning himself with the Aller River to his back. The French artillery were able to pin the Russians between the river and their concentrated gunfire, a major element in Napoleon's fighting style, and many Russians drowned as they tried to escape. War of the Fourth Coalition. Victory, Napoleon.
With Monday.com, every business, no matter the industry or size, can simply work better. Monday.com adapts to every team's needs and connects departments in one unified workspace, giving the entire organization the ability to zoom out, track all moving parts, and make smarter decisions in real time. Go to Monday.com and start your free trial today.
Help build the cycle of strength. Give Ensure Gold with Strength Pro.
This video was made possible by Honey. Install now for free using the link below and start saving money when you shop online. After the Third and Fourth Coalition Wars, Napoleon had decisively defeated all three of his main rivals on the continent, and he was now undoubtedly the master of Europe. After the Battle of Friedland, his enemies sued for peace, and they all met on a raft on a river for negotiations. They had been fighting for the past 4 years, but now Napoleon and Alexander surprisingly got along like a house on fire. They laughed together, they chatted long into the night, they kissed. The two had a lot of mutual respect, and Napoleon even told his wife that if Alexander were a woman, I would make him my mistress. Kind of a weird thing to say to your wife, Napoleon. In the end, they came to an amicable agreement. Russia would lose barely any land, and in return, they'd join France against the UK and invade Sweden. Win-win. On the other hand, Frederick William III was sidelined, and Prussia lost an enormous amount of territory to French client states. Only the UK remained as the last major threat to Napoleon, and they continued to be a big thorn in his side, constantly funding his enemies and using their powerful navy to wreak havoc on French trade and overseas colonies. But what could Napoleon do? The British were safe across the channel. Well, he said, if I can't fight you with guns, I'll fight you with money. Earlier in 1806, Napoleon had announced the Continental System, a total shutoff of the UK from continental trade. No one in Europe was to trade with Britain, and Napoleon hoped that by hitting their economy, he could force them to negotiate. The British economy did take a hit, and they responded in their typical fashion, by going to Copenhagen and blowing a bunch of stuff up. But in general, the British managed to stay afloat by simply increasing their trade with other parts of the world. Many neutral countries found themselves stuck between a rock and a hard place as the two European superpowers demanded they cease trade with the enemy. Hey America, you better not trade with the French or else I'll come burn down the White House. What? This is gonna wreck my economy. I need to start saving money. How the heck am I gonna start saving money? Yeah, that's right, you know where this is going. Do you like shopping in store? Of course not. Then you'd have to get up and use your legs. Gross. Well, what if I told you you could save money doing your shopping from the comfort of your own outhouse, allowing you to upgrade your outhouse to a porta potty? Go you. Honey is a free browser extension that scours the internet for promo codes and applies the best one it can find to your cart. Here I am buying 12 liters of hair gel so I can look my best. I just click this button and Jiminy Crickets. Honey stepped in and helped me save $40. Honey is completely free and has found Oversimplified viewers over $403,000 in savings so far. So seriously, why haven't you added it to your browser yet, you dingus? Click on the link below, joinhoney.com/oversimplified, and you can get Honey for free in 2 easy clicks. That's joinhoney.com/oversimplified to start saving money on your online shopping. Now, where were we? Oh yeah. Making peace with the Russians, a continental blockade, and blowing up Copenhagen. Sick of being blown up for doing almost nothing, and under significant pressure from Napoleon, the Danish officially sided with France. But Napoleon's blockade had the biggest effect on continental Europe, who were now cut off from a major trading partner, one that controlled the seas and held a rich, growing empire. And a lot of countries didn't fully comply. Portugal, a traditional British ally, refused to take part. No problem. Napoleon sent an army and invaded. But it wasn't just Portugal. Many of Napoleon's allies were also suspect. Your Majesty, it seems that Spain isn't properly enforcing your blockade. Spain? Why not? Well, it appears they've been trying to find a way out of being your ally since they lost their fleet at Trafalgar. What is with these people? It's almost like everyone's only pretending to be my ally because they know otherwise I'd beat them up. Do I even have any real friends? Are you my friend, Pierre? Say yes or I'll slap you. Napoleon had come to mistrust his ally to the south, and in particular, Napoleon thought the Spanish royal family were an incompetent mess. All right, Carlos, you've got to get it together. How can I trust you when all you do is go hunting? Meanwhile, you let this ambitious nobody who dislikes me run the country, and you seem to be the only person in the universe who doesn't realize he's boinking your wife. And what's worse, who the heck are you? I'm the king's son. I just overthrew my dad. So, actually, now I'm the king. You people are the biggest cluster of shameless, narcissistic idiots and all around just the worst people I've ever met. Here, have a Kid's Choice Award. French forces, many having conveniently already entered Spain to invade Portugal, occupied Spanish forts, and Napoleon invited the Spanish royals to France to help mediate their differences.
Birch Tree Fortified. 8.50 na lang. Para sa tripleng lakas araw-araw.
All right, we're here with the royal family of Spain. So, Fernando, you've been accused of plotting against your father and vying for the Spanish throne. What do you have to say for yourself? Well, Napoleon, I just think great. Well, I've got the test results right here. Fernando, in the case of the Spanish throne, you are not the king. And Carlos, you are also not the king. I'm the king! Actually, Napoleon made his brother the king, but for all intents and purposes, Spain was now his puppet. He expected the Spanish people to be over the moon at the removal of their unpopular royal family. Imagine his surprise when it turned out that people don't really like to be subjugated by a foreign power, least of all one who had previously attacked the Catholic Church. And so the people of Spain revolted. Brutal fighting broke out as bands of armed Spaniards ambushed French troops across the kingdom, and vicious atrocities were committed on both sides. In addition to fighting the regular Spanish and Portuguese forces, the French had to contend with tens of thousands of guerrilla fighters throughout the Spanish countryside. The British even took the opportunity to land an army led by the future Duke of Wellington. And now, British forces were defeating French ones on land. Napoleon briefly went to Spain in person, and he did drive back the Allied armies, but before long, his attention was needed elsewhere. The whole thing became a nightmare for the Emperor. He excelled at traditional warfare, but this was something more akin to Napoleon's Vietnam. The whole conflict would keep hundreds of thousands of French soldiers and resources bogged down for years. Napoleon was never able to break the will of the Spanish people, and this problem weakened his position in Europe. Hey, Francis, want to go to war with Napoleon again? Oh, I don't know, Britain. He's already whomped me 3 times. I'll give you £1 billion. Well, okay. Seeing that Napoleon was now caught up in Spain, and with some British funding, Austria decided maybe, just maybe, this time, they'd have a chance. So did they? No. Napoleon defeated them in just 4 months. It was quick, but it wasn't exactly easy. The Austrians had been watching Napoleon and learning, and they had made some reforms, while Napoleon, after years of war, was increasingly having to rely on inexperienced conscripts. So this time, the Austrians gave him a run for his money. The Fifth Coalition saw some of the bloodiest battles to date, including Napoleon's first major defeat, and when he did finally defeat the Austrians at the Battle of Wagram, it was a very costly victory. Still, Napoleon had yet again kicked Francis's butt, and as part of the peace terms, Austria lost a bunch more land. Not long after, however, Napoleon and Francis came to another agreement. It was decided that Napoleon would marry Francis's young daughter. But wait, doesn't Napoleon already have a wife? Well, yes, he did. Josephine and Napoleon had become quite fond of one another, but now that Napoleon was playing the monarch game, he needed a male heir, and his aging wife wasn't giving him one, so it was out with the old and in with the new. At least he didn't behead anyone. For Austria, they felt that if Napoleon was going to keep on winning, they may as well be on his side. So through the marriage, Napoleon got an alliance with Austria and a beautiful baby potato. Between the failing blockade against Britain, the ongoing war in Spain, and now his recent struggles in Austria, cracks in Napoleon's invincibility were beginning to show. But still, Look at this map. So blue, so beautiful. Even Sweden, after being pulverized by Russia, overthrew their king, and after an interesting chain of events, ended up putting one of Napoleon's own marshals in charge. Marshal Bernadotte took the name Karl Johan and became Crown Prince of Sweden, after agreeing to join Napoleon's continental system. For now, Sweden was Team France. Napoleon was on top of the world. He had won an endless string of victories. All he had to do now was sit back and not make any major miscalculations that could completely turn the tide of war. So let's see what comes next. France's alliance with Russia was a terrifying prospect. Together, the two could have been unstoppable, but unfortunately, the alliance didn't last. The Russians felt they weren't getting a fair deal. Napoleon's Duchy of Warsaw right on their doorstep was a bit of an insult, and then their economy began to tank because of Napoleon's British blockade. And eventually, they began to open up trade. Your Majesty, it seems Alexander is no longer abiding by the continental system and has begun trading with the British. Alexander? But he kissed me. He kissed you? You wouldn't get it, Pierre. No one would ever kiss you. The security of Napoleon's empire depended on removing the British threat, and he wasn't happy with Russia's backdoor shenanigans. And so in 1812, Napoleon decided to go to war. He gathered together the most massive army Europe had ever seen, made up of troops from every corner of his empire, and he prepared to invade. Okay, it looks like Napoleon's coming for us. Generals, I need ideas. We could stand and fight. No, that's stupid. You're stupid. We could run away. You're a star. You'll remember Napoleon's tactics relied on astonishing speed to outmaneuver his enemy and force a quick, decisive battle. Well, I've got two words for you. Scorched earth. If his opponent retreated while scorching the earth, his men couldn't live off the land. And if his men couldn't live off the land, he needed his supply trains. And if he needed his supply trains, he couldn't move quickly. And if he couldn't move quickly, he couldn't outmaneuver his enemy. And if he couldn't outmaneuver his enemy, I think you get the point. Napoleon launched his invasion and hoped for a quick battle, but all he could do was try to catch the retreating Russians while moving deeper and deeper into hostile territory. As he went, the horribly hot summer devastated his army. His men died of heat, exhaustion, and disease. Supplies began to run out, and his men began to starve. Many deserted, and still the Russians continued to retreat. Numerous times Napoleon considered turning back, but that little voice in his head kept on telling him, keep going, just a little further. And don't worry, you're definitely average height for the time. He nearly caught the Russians at Smolensk, but it was his birthday, so he had a party instead. When he finally reached Moscow, he predicted the Russians wouldn't be willing to give up such a historic and holy city without a fight. And he was right. The Russians finally turned to face him for the single deadliest day of the Napoleonic Wars, the Battle of Borodino. The Russians fought valiantly, and as he got older, Napoleon's battle tactics seemed to become a little less refined and a little more run straight at the enemy, try not to die. He launched a full frontal assault at the Russian defenses, and as a result, the death toll was colossal. The Russians eventually decided to retreat, leaving Moscow to fall into Napoleon's hands.
Ang laki mo na! May king size pala?
Aromang nakakaganda, pero nakaka-hair fall. That's why I switched to Pantene. It gives my daily dose of Pro Vitamin formula that strengthens hair. Mabango na, helps build hair fall immunity pa. Can your shampoo do that? Pantene can.
Quick, the French are taking the city. Release all these prisoners immediately and tell them to burn it to the ground. Well, Jimmy the Arsonist, you are not going to believe your luck. Moscow went up in flames, and as Napoleon entered, it became very clear his army wouldn't be able to stay there very long. But he had just defeated the Russian army and taken their most beloved city. In his mind, he had won. So he sent Tsar Alexander in St. Petersburg a letter. Your Imperial Majesty, Napoleon requests your surrender. How shall I respond? You shan't, Dmitri. Ever? Ever. But, Your Majesty, it will be winter soon. The French forces are stuck 500 miles into Russian territory with dwindling supplies. If we don't say anything, well, then they'll all die. Oh! After waiting for a response for about a month, the first snow of winter began to fall, and Napoleon sensed the catastrophe that was about to unfold. He decided their only choice now was to get out. And that's when it happened. It got cold. Stupid cold. His glorious invasion had just become a race for survival. As the Russians realized the French were fleeing for their lives, they began to close in on their supply line. Men froze to death, their horses as well. There was starvation and disease. The injured and dying could only be left by the side of the road, as it was too slow to try to carry them. And all along the way, the dreaded Russian Cossacks stalked the bleeding French army, and every now and then swept in for a quick attack. Napoleon, fearing capture, kept a vial of poison around his neck. At one point, the Russian armies nearly trapped him against the Berezina River, but a little Napoleon cleverness gave him the old Geoffrey juke, tricking them into thinking he was going south and then escaping across rapidly built pontoon bridges to the north. When the Russians realized where he was and began to close in, the French burned the bridges before everyone could cross. Hundreds drowned, and thousands were captured. At this point, Napoleon got wind of plots against him forming in Paris, so he abandoned his men and went back to France. The remaining French stragglers made it across the border. It's been estimated over 600,000 men went into Russia. Less than 100,000 returned. Napoleon was now in a very precarious situation. His army had just been obliterated, and the other European leaders smelled blood. Here was an opportunity to take advantage of a weakened Napoleon, regain territory and influence, and liberate Europe from his dirty French paws. And so they began to turn. Prussia soon broke their alliance and switched sides, while Austria declared neutrality. Even Sweden, led by one of Napoleon's old marshals, joined the Allies, partly due to Napoleon's earlier invasion of Swedish Pomerania. The War of the Sixth Coalition had begun. The coalition forces had been reforming their armies, and they were now much better. And the UK had also significantly amped up its financial aid to its continental allies. Their armies quickly advanced through Poland and into Germany. In Paris, Napoleon was understandably freaking out. He needed to put together a new army fast, and he called up over 100,000 new conscripts, mostly teenagers. He also put his factories into overdrive, and he was like, "You, make more rifles. You, build new cannons. You, make more horses. I don't make horses. Then who makes horses? Horses make horses. Explain how." Well, when a daddy horse and a mommy horse love each other very much. Yes, go on. Well, then the daddy horse... I'm sorry, Napoleon. You're 43. I thought you'd know this stuff. Don't touch me! I'm gonna be sick. As it turned out, Napoleon's lack of horses would take the biggest toll on his army, since his tactics relied on speed, maneuverability, and destruction. When he took the fight to the Allies in 1813, he did defeat them and sent them running. But lacking cavalry, he was unable to effectively pursue and destroy. He needed horses. For the Allies, being defeated in battle by a man whose army was now full of inexperienced conscripts was concerning. So both sides were like, hold up. Time out. The Allies were somewhat cornered, and had Napoleon kept going, it's possible he could have won. But instead he agreed to a brief truce with the Austrians mediating between the two sides. When Austria demanded Napoleon make major concessions, Napoleon told them to shove it. Having had their terms rejected, Austria felt now they were justified in saying, well, we tried, and they joined the coalition. Okay everyone, look at us. The boys are back together. But Napoleon is still dangerous, so we need a plan. Any ideas? Ooh, I know. No, forget it. That's stupid. No. I've got it! When he approaches, we run away. Genius. He's a genius. The plan was as follows. Wherever Napoleon advanced, whoever he advanced on would avoid battle, allowing the others to sweep in from the sides and attack the French marshals guarding his flanks. Essentially, the plan was, don't try to fight Napoleon. And this plan worked tremendously. The Allies scored a number of victories that saw Napoleon move back to the city of Leipzig, where he would make one last major stand as the Allied armies converged in on him from all sides. The stage was set for the biggest and bloodiest battle of the Napoleonic Wars, the Battle of Leipzig. Almost 500,000 troops from over a dozen nations stretched across the battlefield. The French found themselves fighting on all sides for 4 days against the Austrians, Prussians, Swedes, and Russians. It's no wonder this battle is also sometimes referred to as the Battle of the Nations. The French fought ferociously, but ultimately were no match for the coordinated efforts of the coalition. At one point, in the midst of battle, Saxon troops allied with the French had a team huddle and were like, hey guys, I'm pretty sure the French are losing. Let's switch sides. And so they did. When it became clear that Napoleon couldn't win, he ordered a retreat across the only bridge over the river. The Allies swarmed into the city, and desperate fighting raged in the streets. Okay, Corporal, after everyone has crossed the river, I need you to blow up the bridge. Okay? Not before everyone's crossed, after. You got that? Yes, Colonel, I'm not 5. I can comprehend time. Good. Wait, did he say before or after? Well, fortune favors the bold. The bridge was blown early, and 30,000 French troops were stranded and captured. A disaster. And with that, the dominoes were beginning to come crashing down on Napoleon. In the south, an army under the British Duke of Wellington had been pushing the French out of Spain for the past few years, and were now crossing into France. Austrian armies had pushed into Italy, while Napoleon's old flamboyant cavalry commander, Murat, who Napoleon had made king of Naples, decided to switch sides. German states, many resentful after years under Napoleon's thumb, turned against him, and the Confederation of the Rhine collapsed. Bernadotte invaded Denmark, and they were forced to join the coalition, while the Netherlands were liberated. You'd think Napoleon might have seen the writing on the wall, but he was Napoleon, and so instead, he prepared to keep fighting. As attitudes in Paris were already beginning to turn against him, he called up more conscripts to defend the exhausted nation. As for the Allies, they weren't sure exactly what they were aiming for here. A few peace offers were floated that may have let Napoleon keep his position, but the British kept throwing around even more money, and eventually, they all agreed that the ultimate aim was the deposition of Napoleon entirely. And so, Napoleon embarked on one of his most famous campaigns to defend the homeland. He was completely outnumbered, but the Allied armies had split up and spread out. His army was so small that he could move at lightning speed, and he used this to his advantage. In the famous 6 Days campaign against Prussian General Blücher, he attacked from all directions and defeated Blücher's forces 4 times, only suffering 1/10 of the casualties he inflicted. Even with his back completely to the wall, Napoleon was still Napoleon. Then he turned south to take on Schwarzenberg's army of Bohemia and enjoyed even more victories. However, Napoleon's problem was that he couldn't be everywhere at once, and wherever he wasn't, the Allies continued to push towards Paris. He made one last-ditch attempt at moving in behind the enemy lines and cutting off their communications, but Paris was in disarray, and the people were sick of war. One ambitious and slightly treacherous politician sent the Allied armies a letter basically saying, "Hey guys, come on in." And so, they did. The city's defenders surrendered, and as the Allied leaders entered Paris, the people cheered them as bringers of peace. Paris had fallen. Quick, marshals, gather your men. We're gonna launch an assault on Paris. Where are my marshals? They all left and told me to give you this note. Napoleon's marshals had realized what he hadn't. It was over, and they insisted all that was left now, for the good of France, was for him to abdicate. And without the support of his army, Napoleon had no choice. He hoped his son could take his place, but it was decided instead to restore the old Bourbon monarchy. Old King Louis XVI's brother would become the King of France. It was almost like the French Revolution had never even happened. But what will we do with Napoleon? We can't have a hyperactive 44-year-old menace running around reigniting revolutionary ideals and plotting his return. Well, why don't we send him, I don't know, there. The location chosen for Napoleon's exile was the small island of Elba, just off the coast of Italy. Napoleon was to rule over the island, and even got to keep the title Emperor of Elba. The Allies must have been in stitches when they came up with that. When he learned what his fate was to be, he drank the poison he had been keeping around his neck. But it had gone out of date, so instead of a quick and painless death, he got a painful stummy-wummy instead. Before he left France, he addressed his oldest and closest guard one last time, making an emotional speech that ended with him kissing their flag. And off he went to exile. The deal that was given to him was actually quite generous. His family were given titles, he was to receive a state pension from France, and he was able to receive many distinguished visitors, all eager to come and meet the famed emperor. And he ruled over Elba well, improving infrastructure and introducing many legal and social reforms aimed at improving life on the island. Hey Napoleon, just coming in to check on how it's all going. Holy smokes! But it wasn't all good. For one thing, he learned of the death of his first wife Josephine and was deeply saddened. He was forbidden from seeing his son and current wife, and in Austria, Emperor Francis had ordered a local count to seduce her, so she would forget about Napoleon. Then, the new King Louis XVIII refused to give Napoleon his agreed pension. He was under constant threat of assassination, and there were even rumors that the Allies were thinking of relocating him somewhere even more remote. But the biggest problem was that Napoleon was once the master of Europe. He had lived a thrilling life of adventure, fame, and glory. Now, he found himself on a tiny island in the Mediterranean, and he was bored. Wouldn't it be nice if he could somehow return to France and reclaim his throne? Hey Napoleon, want to go back to France and reclaim your throne? I would, Pierre. But how? Well, I was thinking we could just take this boat. Will that work? Surprisingly, yes. Pierre, remember when I told you no one would ever kiss you? Yes, sire. Well, pucker up, boyo. Yay. When Napoleon left Elba, it wasn't really the daring escape you might think. He basically had kind of a leaving ceremony, hopped on a ship, and sailed back to France. He brought with him an army of about 1,000 men, and he began his journey to Paris. However, in Paris, there was now a new king, and at first, the people largely accepted him because the last few years of war under Napoleon had brought immense death and economic suffering. That's right, the king is back, baby. Divine right to rule. Don't worry, everyone. I know the economy is kaput, but I and my courtiers will withdraw into this palace, and we will definitely work as hard as we can to fix everything. Oh yeah, that's why we got rid of the king. As the Bourbon monarchy began to look more and more like a return to the past, and the returning nobility seemed hellbent on regaining their lost privileges, the people weren't too happy. And so, Napoleon hoped that his glorious return would be met with jubilation. In the end, the reaction was a little mixed, but many were happy to see their old emperor. Your Majesty, it seems that Napoleon is back and marching this way with 1,000 men. That guy? No problem. I have hundreds of thousands of men. Send them to arrest him. Your Majesty, it seems the thousands of men we sent to arrest Napoleon have all joined his side. Well, I'm off to Belgium. If you ever need a king again, be sure to let me know. As Napoleon continued his journey, the king had sent battalions of men to stop him, but they largely comprised of Napoleon's old soldiers, many unhappy with King Louis's military reforms. And so, when ordered to arrest him, they simply couldn't do it. In one famous incident, the troops began to cry out, "Long live the Emperor." When Napoleon reached Paris, with King Louis having fled, he entered unopposed to reclaim his throne. Napoleon was back from the dead. Okay everyone, now that we've finally gotten rid of that guy, let's try to make sure something like this can never happen again. What's that doing there? Hey fellow monarchs! This time, Napoleon promised he would be a mucho good boy and not start any wars. But the Allied leaders were having none of it. They declared Napoleon an outlaw and the illegitimate ruler of France. Then, they declared war. Not on France, but on Napoleon himself. And when you have multiple empires declaring war on you as an individual, that's how you know you're a very naughty boy. The Allied powers began making plans to combine their forces and once again invade France. The most immediate threat to Napoleon were the British and Prussians hanging out in nearby Belgium. If Napoleon could knock them out quickly, maybe he could force the Allies to negotiate, and maybe he could hold on to his power. Together, the two armies to the north outnumbered him, so he made a plan to divide them and take them on separately. Historians debate how much of a chance Napoleon had here, but this same strategy of dividing and conquering had worked for him multiple times. He marched north with 125,000 men and took on the Allies in a number of initial engagements, defeating the Prussians before turning to take on the British. But to Napoleon's dismay, miscommunication and hesitation among his marshals allowed both enemy armies to retreat, and crucially, rather than fleeing east, the Prussians moved north, where they could remain in contact with the British. Napoleon sent a force to hold off the Prussians as he moved in on the British, now holding a defensive position at Waterloo. Prussian General Blücher sent word that he would come to Wellington's aid if he could just hold off the French for long enough. Napoleon had to defeat Wellington before the Prussian army could arrive in force, and it was close. The British held the high ground and a number of key defensive buildings across the battlefield. After waiting some hours he didn't have for the ground to dry, Napoleon sent men to assault the Hougoumont farm, but the British-German garrison there held out. French Marshal Ney launched a number of miscalculated cavalry charges at the British lines. The British formed defensive square formations, and they tore the French cavalry to shreds, while one guy chose the absolute worst time to go on a bender. The French did manage to capture a farmhouse directly in front of the British line, and from there, they unleashed artillery hellfire on the British square formations. And as Napoleon sent his Imperial Guard in to finish the British off, a nervous Wellington knew his lines were at breaking point. But the Prussians had earlier begun to arrive, and now they were arriving in large numbers. And after the British held out and sent the French Imperial Guard running, the French lines panicked, fearing they had been encircled, and they began to flee. The Battle of Waterloo was an Allied victory. And with that, Napoleon's hopes of returning to glory were vanquished. He knew he was defeated. He went to the British and said, "Can I please have a house near London?" And the British replied, No. Instead, to make sure Napoleon was put away once and for all, they sent him to one of the most isolated and remote places they could think of. A tiny island in the Atlantic Ocean, St. Helena. Here, a deeply isolated and depressed Emperor Napoleon would live the remaining years of his life. His house was a wooden bungalow, not exactly on par with the Tuileries Palace. Much to his frustration, his captors referred to him as general, rather than calling him emperor. His mail was censored, his visitors were vetted. There was almost no way he could escape such an isolated island. But just to be sure, he was guarded by 2,000 British soldiers and 2 ships that circled the island 24 hours a day. He had once been the most powerful man alive, and images of the victorious Napoleon depict a strong leader, hand firmly in jacket. Depictions of Napoleon on St. Helena show a disheveled old man, hand firmly in pants. He had lost everything. And by the way, he was only 46, so maybe it's about time you know what? You're doing all right, kid.
Good nom, fresh gata. Na ay 5 lami signs. Mura ra dyan ang fresh gata. Nom, nom, nom. Good nom.
Napoleon fought one last battle while on the island, the battle for his reputation. He spent hours writing his memoirs, espousing his achievements, recording his greatness, and turning himself and his story into a phenomenal legend. And in this battle, he certainly succeeded. His mark on history cannot be denied. After his defeat, the European monarchs had got to work restoring Europe to its traditional balance and reasserting their dominance. But after Napoleon had spread the influence of the French Revolution, these returning monarchs would have a difficult time regaining their absolute control. France returned to the rule of the Bourbons, but it would go on to stage another revolution, and then another one. Reaction to Napoleon's rule in places like Germany and Italy propelled forward the ideas and feelings of modern unity and nationalism, and his Napoleonic Code still remains the basis of law in various modern countries. The modern world owes a lot to Napoleon's legacy. He remains statistically possibly the greatest military general in history, and his revolutionary military tactics changed the face of warfare. He was the last truly great leader to both lead his armies in battle while retaining total political control over a vast empire. There's still hope for Joe Biden, but the man remains somewhat of an enigma, and we still aren't sure exactly what to make of him in some regards. Was he the champion of the French Revolution, spreading equality wherever he went, or did he betray it by making himself an absolute monarch and restricting certain liberties? Was he an ambitious and aggressive conqueror, hell-bent on bringing Europe to its knees? Or was he simply defending himself against an aggressive Europe, hell-bent on reducing his power? Some things will continue to be debated. Napoleon died at the age of 51, officially of stomach cancer, but some believe he may have been poisoned. The British buried him in a tin coffin inside a mahogany coffin, inside a lead coffin, inside another mahogany coffin. I guess this time, they wanted to make sure he stayed where they put him. In 1840, his remains were moved to Paris, where they now rest under the dome of Les Invalides. The man from humble origins, with huge ambition, ruthless determination, immaculate skill on the battlefield, and a hefty dose of luck, who was determined to make his mark on history, did just that. There is no immortality, he said, but the memory that is left in the minds of men. And in that sense, Napoleon knew he would live on forever. Oh, and to reiterate, he was definitely average height for the time.
Lucky Me Pansit Canton Kasalapak. Busog na, sarapines pa.
Lahat ng special moments si Prince ay nandiyan ako. Wala ako dyan nung sa awards night niya kasi masama ang kalagayan ko.
This video was made possible by NordVPN. Click the link below to stay safe online and get a huge discount off a 2-year plan with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Trouble sleeping? Need someone to snuggle? Then why not snuggle me? The limited edition Oversimplified plushie is available for pre-order for a few days only. Get it quick along with some beautiful new character pins. Look at us, boys. We've only gone and bloody done it. We beat the Brits and secured independence. Now to expand westward and conquer the rest of the continent. Thomas? It looks like a bunch of different people already live out west. What? Oh no! That means we can't expand. I hate my life! Whoa, whoa, whoa. I didn't say they were white people. At the end of the Revolutionary War, when the United States secured its independence from Great Britain, the two sides met in Paris to settle the terms. Among various things, they discussed American territorial gains, and the British granted them a generous amount of land out west. However, Benjamin Franklin appeared to have an additional fascination. Oh, Canada. So voluptuous. You think we can maybe acquire some of that? Quit ogling our territory. But look at those curves. I'd worry less about Canada's curves and more about your own curves, Benjamin. Many in America suggested that one day, the Canadian colonies should become a part of the United States. In response, Britain suggested that many in America should shut the hell up. Well, if Britain wasn't going to give up Canada, then the two sides had to agree on where to put their border. Easy enough for the most part. Follow some existing borders, add in a few rivers and lakes, maybe even a parallel for good measure. But then there was a question. What would happen here? Straight line, straight line. And so it was. The border would go from the northwesternmost point of this perfectly oval-shaped lake and continue in a straight line westward until it met the Mississippi River. Perfect. Or was it? Well, as it turned out, the lake didn't actually look like this, but like this. And the Mississippi wasn't here, but here. So in the end, none of that made even the slightest bit of sense. Don't blame the founding fathers. They were just using the best map available. Blame the guy who made it. But to the minds of the day, the issue had been solved. And it was finally time to start getting along. Oh, back to war they go. The Glorious War of 1812 saw the Americans try to invade Canada, and the British burn down the White House. But when all was said and done, it was pretty much a draw. And once again, America and Britain had to enter into peace negotiations. By now, both sides realized the original border they came up with was a piece of hot garbage. And since America had also recently obtained a huge amount of land from Napoleon, they decided they would need to re-examine the border issue. Straight line, straight line. And so it was. To fix the problems of the previous border agreement, they decided to go from the northwesternmost point of this lake, as had been previously agreed, down to the 49th parallel, and from there the line would go straight as an arrow up until the Rocky Mountains. But beyond the Rockies, the two sides couldn't quite agree on where it would go next, because both sides claimed the territory beyond the Rockies was theirs. See, throughout its early history, America as a nation had its eyes heavily fixated on all that juicy land out west, ripe for invasion. Settlementation. America wanted to expand. Not only was it their right, some believed it was a destiny given to them by God himself to multiply and spread across the continent, like rats or disease. Okay guys, just before we take over everything, God definitely said this is what we're meant to do, right? Yeah, that's what he said, right? Isn't that what he said? And who was it who spoke to God? It was Billy, right? I thought it was Sharon's cat. I hear voices all the time. Well, it was one of us. There's no way we made this whole thing up to justify our ruthless collective imperialist tendencies. Yeah! All right, well, in that case, let's get out there and make the world a better place, just as God intended. This belief in divinely destined expansion would later be given its very own name, Manifest Destiny. But America wasn't the only one interested in controlling the Western territories. At the time, Canada was made up of a number of colonies, collectively referred to as British North America. This one over here was owned by the Hudson's Bay Company, a British charter company dedicated to turning as many beavers as possible into as many felt hats as possible as quickly as possible, and the indigenous people became a key supplier. As a result, the British were also eager to control the land out west and secure that region's valuable resources, and in particular, the Great Columbia River was deemed vital to the beaver business. So when it came to the question of what would happen to the border beyond the Rockies, the conversation went a little like this. The line should keep going straight because we're manifestly destined to gain the entire North American continent. No, we need this river so we can keep scalping beavers. Look, why don't we just draw the border along the river? That way we both have access to it. Well, that would be a completely fair compromise that protects the interests of both parties. And there's no way I'm ever going to agree to it! Having come to a roadblock, both sides simply agreed that for now, they would jointly occupy the Northwestern Territory. They were both free to settle and trade there. But rest assured, the agreement was only temporary. Eventually somebody would get their way. Listen, Yank, we can jointly occupy this land, but I ain't sharing anything else. I don't want to see you using my toothbrush. I don't want to catch you wearing my underwear. And I don't want to catch you using my computer and selling my data to advertisers. Well, then you, my friend, should use NordVPN. What the fuck? Do you like giving strangers your passwords to your most important online accounts? Me neither. And that's why I use NordVPN. NordVPN has thousands of secure servers in over 60 countries, allowing you to safely surf the net at the fastest speed possible. It works across all your devices, so you're protected on the go, even 6 of them simultaneously. And it's super easy to use. With just the click of a button, you can head on over to South Korea and watch every single BTS video known to mankind. With NordVPN, you no longer need to worry about those shady websites, annoying pop-ups, or undesired eyes spying on your browsing history. And you can even unlock content that's been blocked in your country, like this video. It even comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So why not go to nordvpn.com/oversimplified to get a 2-year plan with a huge discount, plus an additional month for free. And as always, you'll be supporting my channel. So thank you. Now where were we? Oh yeah. Bickering over boundaries, manifesting destiny, and a joint occupation of Oregon. And one man living here who felt the territory should be British was James Douglas, the Hudson's Bay Company's no-nonsense chief factor at Fort Vancouver. Ah, what a beautiful, unspoiled corner of the British Empire. I've got my spotted dick, my Spice Girls fan club membership, and an unrelenting negative outlook on life that affects everyone around me. What are you looking at, Stephen? Yes. Truly British. What the? The problem for men like Douglas was that many Americans had already begun streaming up the Oregon Trail. Gunslinging, howdy neighboring, diarrhea having. By the thousands, they were pouring into the Oregon Territory in search of land to settle and farm. This, however, crowded out the fur trade, and eventually, a very bitter Douglas and the other Hudson's Bay traders at Fort Vancouver were ordered to relocate north to a new base of operations. But the Americans keep coming and they don't stop coming. Hopped in their wagons and they hit the ground running. Didn't make sense to keep sharing Oregon when they outnumbered the Brits more than 6-1. And suddenly, the whole joint occupation deal was being called into question. Newly elected President Polk maintained that America had an obvious claim to the entire region, even implying a possible war with Britain. Fiery language from U.S. senators declared that American rifles would annihilate the Hudson's Bay Company in Oregon, and America even gave Britain notice that it was pulling out of the joint occupation agreement. The British were alarmed as the two sides stood on the brink of war. But in the end, neither truly wanted to fight. The British favored maintaining good economic relations, while the Americans had already gotten themselves into a war with Mexico. So after a bit of back and forth, the British finally said, "Fine, you wanted a straight line? There's your straight line." And so, the agreement was made. The border would continue directly to the Strait of Georgia. But because the British insisted they keep Vancouver Island, it would then move south through the center of the channel and on to the Pacific Ocean. Finally, the issue of the northwest border had been solved. Hold the phone. Discrepancy detected. Enhance frame, 200%. Enhance. Enhance. Oh, too far. Perfect. Now, show me the exact wording of the treaty. The line of boundary goes to the middle of the channel, and thence southerly through the middle of said channel? But there's loads of channels. So, you tell me, dear viewer, which channel is the treaty referring to? And therefore, who owns these islands? Is the wording of the treaty maybe a little too vague? Well, that's exactly the problem encountered by the people living in the area. The British insisted that the channel intended by the treaty was the Rosario Strait, and therefore, the islands were British. The Americans, on the other hand, argued that the intended channel was the Harrow Strait, and therefore, the islands were American. At times, the debate became rather heated. Even the individuals who negotiated and signed the treaty at times didn't seem entirely sure which channel the treaty meant, and representatives from the Hudson's Bay Company begged them to make it clearer. But thousands of miles away, the people in power simply had more to worry about than some tiny islands in the middle of nowhere.
Order! Shut up!
All right, listen up. We got a lot to get through. The 7th Earl of Gissingham says he encountered a foul beast in the fields of Upper Fardingdom late last night and put this sketch together? That's a poor person, Darren. Ugh. Next, Lord Piddlingham says he has a new mole on his backside? How is that parliamentary business, George? Oh, some islands in the Pacific Northwest are in dispute and could lead to a war with America? Boring! Fine, let's take a look at that mole, George. And so, for now, the islands were simply held in dispute. Were they British or were they American? I'm sure this conflict won't cause anyone to die. And one man who thought the islands were undeniably British was James Douglas, now the governor of Vancouver Island. He had already once had American settlers encroach on his territory and force him to move. And by golly, he wasn't going to let it happen again. As far as he was concerned, those islands were not only British, but prime agricultural land. And given the chance, those glubby Yanks wouldn't hesitate to start pitching flags with their glubby little hands. And so, he came up with a plan. If the British settled the islands first, then that would surely secure them for Britain. And so in 1853, Douglas sent an Irishman by the name of Charles Griffin, along with some Hawaiian shepherds, to go set up a sheep farm on San Juan Island. And set up a sheep farm they did. The place was rammed with sheep, 1,369 to be exact. But within those flocks of woolly cowards could also be found a number of beautiful, prized Berkshire pigs. Oh, Porky, you look stunning. You're the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. Would you perhaps like to go to the island ball together tonight? Oink once for no. Roll around in that cow crap if yes.
Yes! I'm covered in poo and I'm the luckiest man alive!
But life on the island for Charles Griffin wasn't to be a perfect paradise of pig pageants, because unfortunately for him, the Americans also believed the island was theirs. One day, in 1854, an American customs collector was sailing around the islands on the outlook for bands of native tribesmen when he spotted something. Aha! I've got you now, you savages. Over yonder. Those are sheep, sir. Sheep, you say? What are they doing here? Let's go and negotiate with them. Negotiate with sheep? Are you crazy?
I'm perfectly stable, you rat bag! Call me crazy again and I'll eat your eyes!
Hello, good sir. We request to speak with your leader. Out of my way. Allow me to parley with this foul beast. Hey, stop threatening my sheep. Your sheep? You mean to tell me that you, a British subject, have illegally imported these sheep into American territory? I'll have you know that you, an American, are currently trespassing on British territory. The Americans felt that they were entitled to collect taxes on the British property, because the island was American, and they threatened seizure if dues weren't paid. The British, meanwhile, threatened to arrest the Americans, because the island was British, and the two sides were in a standoff. To give Charles Griffin the legal power to deal with the American trespassers, Douglas said, "Hey, put on this wig." Boom, you're a magistrate now. And in turn, Griffin went to one of his Hawaiian shepherds and said, "Hey, I'm making you a constable. Put on this badge." The British then went off to arrest the US Customs Inspector. But, being an American, he emerged from his tent with 4 pistols and a giant knife, so the Brits had to back down. Eventually, raids by northern tribes chased the US officer from the island, but the Americans weren't done yet. Officials from nearby Whatcom County in Washington Territory believed the island fell under their jurisdiction, and they decided it was time to make the British pay up once and for all. They sent one Sheriff Barnes to go confront Charles Griffin. "Hey, you owe us $80.33 for all this farm stuff you got here. Go suck an egg." Oh, I see. So that's how it is, huh? That's how it's gonna be, is it? That's the way in which things are, eh? That be how it will, is it? Will it be how that is, huh? That be the way in which things be the way they are, is that? Get off my property! So the sheriff and other Whatcom County officials felt they were now well within their rights to seize and auction off Griffin's sheep in order to recoup lost taxes. And who would they auction these prized breeding rams off to but themselves? Then, in a pretty chaotic scene, they worked to tie the rams to their boats. And when Charles Griffin came running to rescue his kidnapped sheep, being Americans, they pulled out guns on him, and he had to back down. In all, Charles Griffin lost 34 breeding rams, and he was furious. The British complained to the American government, who were shocked to hear what had been going on at their northwest border. And both governments told their officials in the area to back off. We're not trying to start a major war over some dumb sheep and a stupid island. But also, the islands are definitely ours. Under no circumstances let the other side have them. For now, both governments agreed to set up yet another boundary commission to decide which channel was the correct border. But it often devolved into petty bickering. The British did make one interesting suggestion, though. We could draw the border through this middle channel and split the islands between us. Well, that would be a completely fair compromise that protects the interests of both parties. And there's no way I'm ever going to agree to it! And in the aftermath of the sheep raid, James Douglas, still stationed at Fort Victoria, became even more cautious of American encroachment into his territory. Mr. Douglas, sir, it appears an Indian has discovered gold in the Fraser Canyon, just north of here. Shut up! Keep your voice down, boy. We can't risk those glubby Americans hearing about this, or our territory here will be infested with them. Oh no! The Fraser Canyon Gold Rush attracted a heap of Americans to the region. Some got lucky. Most did not. And of those that didn't, rather than returning all the way home, many simply decided to settle in the area. And in particular, the juicy green pastures of San Juan Island were rather appealing. Believing the island was American territory, around a dozen American settlers moved there in the late 1850s. One of them was a man named Lyman Cutler, a young man in his mid-20s, and lazy as pie. He didn't want to have to clear a space in the forest to build his home, so he said, I'll just build my cabin right in the middle of this British sheep run. I'm sure that won't make anyone mad. When he planted potato seeds in his garden, rather than building a nice protective fence around them, he said, I'll just fence in 3 sides and hope all these British farm animals have a moral compass and respect my property rights. Griffin's pig was a Berkshire, well known for rooting, and Lyman's fairly pathetic fence made for a bad combination. Numerous times he had had to chase the pig away from his property, and he once angrily marched up to Griffin's home, saying, Hey, British farm idiot, keep your stupid pig out of my potatoes. It is up to you to keep your potatoes out of my pig. Griffin was furious with his new American neighbors. They built their homes all over his sheep pastures. And besides, what right did they have to be here anyway? It was British territory. Lyman, on the other hand, swore the local government had assured him his land claims were legitimate, and so to him, the British were out of line. Look at that sick freak. In love with his pig. Isn't that just sick? Yeah, what a freak. Not like our love, Spuddy. Ours is all natural. Yep, just a man and his potato. Nothing wrong with that. But the tension between Lyman and Griffin was just about to explode. What the? Spuddy? All right, you damn dirty pig. That's the final straw. Lyman shot the pig. After taking a second to calm down, he felt bad about murdering Griffin's prized boar. So he went to him and said, Hey man, look, I kinda just killed your pig. It was eating my potatoes again, and I don't know, man, I kinda just killed your pig. Killed your pig. Killed your pig. You swine! No, the swine is the one I killed. I'm Lyman. Griffin demanded Lyman pay $100 for the loss of the pig, an outrageous sum at the time. Obviously, Lyman refused, threatening to shoot any more animals that dared enter his property, even threatening to shoot Griffin himself. When Griffin complained to James Douglas, British officials went and confronted the pig killer. Again, they insisted he pay up, and if he didn't, Lyman claimed they threatened to arrest him and take him back to Victoria. British officials arresting an American on American soil and trying him under British law? Now that's controversial. And it's a controversy that attracted the attention of an American general in charge of the Department of Oregon, one William S. Harney. This guy, General Harney, had a reputation. He's the kind of guy who invades Mexico without orders, wasting valuable resources and creating an embarrassing situation for everyone involved. He's the kind of guy who has one of his own men arrested for writing the wrong header on a report. He's the kind of guy who finds a dog digging up his yard and then chases it for 1.5 miles just to give it a beating. He hated superiors, hated being told what to do, and had been court-martialed 4 times for disobeying orders. Contemporaries described him as an imbecile, all matter and no mind, an arrogant humbug, and a laughingstock. Like I said, General Harney had a reputation. He hated the British and was out for any opportunity to earn personal glory for himself. By some accounts, he even wanted to become president. And so, in July 1859, when he happened to visit San Juan Island, and he learned of the plight of the Americans living there, the shooting of a pig, and the British threat to arrest Lyman Cutler, General Harney went into scheme mode. Hey yo, Captain Pickett. Yes sir, listen carefully. I need you to go pick up some flowers and bring them to my place later. I've got a plan. Here I am, sir. What's the plan? Pickett, you and I are going to start a war. What do you mean, sir? Okay, listen up. An American man shoots a worthless pig on San Juan Island, and the British threaten to arrest him. Outrageous, but we can use it. We get the settlers there to send us a petition saying they need American troops for protection. That's when you go with your men and occupy the island. The British will find American troops on an island they consider theirs so offensive, they won't hesitate to blow you to smithereens. Then, it's war. We bring in reinforcements and we fight back. I'll write to Washington, D.C., letting them know what's happening. But here's the kicker. My letter will take 6 whole weeks to get there. Before the government even gets a chance to respond, telling me I'm an idiot and ordering me to cease fire, the island will be ours. Hell, we could even invade Vancouver Island or British Columbia. It's foolproof. Wow, very impressive, sir. But I gotta ask, why? Well, I'll level with you, Pickett. Historians still contest exactly what it is I'm trying to do here. It's possible I'm trying to expand America's territory. Maybe I'm trying to play the hero so I can become president. Some have even suggested that since I'm a slave-owning Southerner, I may be trying to create a diversion to help the South secede in the upcoming Civil War. But if there's one thing that almost everyone can agree on, it's that I'm an idiot. I see. But hold on, what'd you tell me to bring flowers for? Because, Pickett, they're pretty and I like them! There are also historians who believe that Harney and Pickett had no secret plan at all, and were not scheming masterminds, but simply hot-headed buffoons, genuinely outraged at the audacity of the British, and trying to protect American citizens. But the fact of the matter is, Pickett took the very controversial and extremely provocative act of landing American troops on disputed territory. He set up his camp in a very exposed position and erected a very provocative sign proclaiming that only American laws applied on the island. It was almost like he was asking to be fired upon. Or, again, maybe he was just an idiot. When a British official sent to the island to get rid of the unruly American settlers now saw that there were American troops, he demanded they leave. He was obviously told to go suck an egg. When Douglas found out, he was enraged. To him, the American landing constituted an invasion. Harney sent a report back to the War Department in D.C., justifying his actions with exaggerated claims of British villainy. But he knew it would take 6 weeks to get there, and another 6 weeks for their reply to come back. For now, the situation was entirely in the hands of local military and government officials, and the ball was in the British court. Would the temperamental Governor Douglas and the powerful British Navy respond to the American provocation with force? Were Britain and America really about to go to war over the shooting of a pig? Well, if one man were to have his way, it's entirely possible they would. James Douglas had already had Americans force him out of Oregon. They had threatened his position in Victoria during the gold rush. Now they had invaded his island, and he had had it. It was time to turn
Naging
to the
amateur po
Royal
si
Navy.
Napoles, eh. Ngayon po, 100
Captain Hornby,
billions na po, eh.
go to the island and prevent
Ang
any more
kinukulit
Americans
ba sa
from
ating
landing.
kababayan?
And take this magistrate with you to arrest Captain
Kaya
Pickett.
kailangan na po natin
Use
ito.
force if
Number 8,
necessary.
Whistleblowers
Just
Protection
don't do anything to
Act.
start a war.
Susuportahan po natin
Wait,
ito.
you want me to use force but
Number 9,
not
Heavy
start a
Equipment
war?
Registration and
I'm
Leasing
sorry.
Act.
Is that too much to ask?
Number 10,
Princess? When
kailangan
Captain
meron
Hornby
po
got to the
tayong
island
flooding
and saw that the
integrated
American
master
force
plan
there
act.
was even larger than expected,
Number 11,
his concern grew. He
Kaya
sent
amin
word
po
back to
natin ang
Douglas, who
Ombudsman
in
Act.
response ordered even
Kasi
more
wala siyang
ships to the
masyadong
island.
ngipin.
And at this
Halimbawa,
point, the naval officers were like, hey man,
i-amend natin ang Section 13.
let's talk. They were concerned Douglas's escalation was leading them to war.
include
And they convinced him
recovery
it probably
or
wasn't a terribly good idea to
consideration
just go up to
made
an American
any
military
government
captain with his
official or
armed men and say,
employee,
hey bucko,
regardless of the
you're
nature
under
of their
arrest.
position, whether appointed or elected.
Please don't shoot me. Douglas
Ito
gave
po yung
in.
isa pang
To
maganda.
prevent any
Amend
hostilities,
Section
he canceled
21
all orders
that
and told the
despite
Navy, for
exception
now,
to
to simply
disciplinary
keep an eye on
authority
the
of the
Americans.
Ombudsman, a
He did send
recommendation
one more
for
ship
immediate
for good
action
measure.
shall be
Captain
made by the
Pickett,
Ombudsman
now
to the
seeing the British
appropriate
ships
ethics
with their
committee in
guns aimed
cases
directly at his
involving
exposed
members of
camp,
Congress
said, see
upon
Jeff,
establishment
look at
of the
that.
sufficiency
We're about to
of
get
the
blown to
complaint.
bits. All
Kasi
according to
sa present
plan.
law ng Ombudsman, hindi po
Hang on.
kasali ang members ng Congress.
blown to bits.
Number 12,
Pickett
amendments to the
hastily moved
government
his camp
auditing
from its
code.
very exposed position
Yung
to another
COA dapat-
position,
wala pong
which,
ngipin
as
ng
it happened,
COA
was also very exposed.
Kung
It
titignan
probably
niyo,
won't surprise
Presidential
you to learn
Decree
Pickett
1445,
came
ang
dead last
sinasabi
in his
dyan,
graduating class.
kailangan
Nearby
preventive
American and
ang
British
audit.
officials began showing up to ask
Paano
Pickett what
kayo
the heck he was even doing.
makakapag-prevent po ng
Then, a bunch of
pagnanakaw
tourists
sa
showed
mga
up because a major
ating
war
mga
breaking out in their
projects?
doorstep
Sa
was the
lahat
single
ng
most exciting
gawain.
thing to ever happen in any of their miserable
Purpose
frontier
audit lahat.
lives. One Charles Griffin was particularly unhappy.
Na
First, his pig had been
nakulimbat na yung
shot.
pera.
Now his sheep pastures were
Pagkatapos
being trampled by
mag-audit siya,
soldiers and
post-audit,
tourists
sasabihin
alike.
niya, notice
He
of
complained to
disallowance.
Governor Douglas, who was still pretty upset
Nakakita
about
na
the
po
whole
ba kayo
thing.
na
Douglas felt British honor
pagkakataon,
itself
kahit ano
was
man,
at stake. So he
lahat
decided
ng
that if
notice of
American
disallowance
forces were allowed to
na
be on the island, well
inisyu
then
ng
by
COA,
golly,
maliban lang
the
sa
British
nag-volunteer na
should be there
magsoli ng
too.
paunti-unti.
It would be a joint
Yung malaki
military
lang po.
occupation. Upon hearing
notice of
Douglas's new plan
disallowance,
to
meron
land
po bang
British troops on the
napakulong?
island,
Meron ba silang-
Captain Hornby decided to
meron
go
silang
speak with
nasingil?
Pickett in person.
Meron po ako na
After
monitor,
informing him of the
100
plan,
billion sa
Pickett replied that if they
SBNA,
dared
naging
land,
final and
he
executory,
would open
umabot
fire.
ng Korte
So
Suprema.
there they were. The British
Final
had
and
orders to
executory.
land. The Americans
Hindi
had
pa po
orders to
nakolekta
prevent
ng
their
COA hanggang
landing.
ngayon.
This was it. War
Walang kang ipin-ipin.
over a
Ito
small
po ang
island in
gusto
the middle of
naming
nowhere,
gawin lahat.
over a
After
pig
3
and some potatoes, over whether the U.S.-Canada border
investigations,
looked like this
pati
or
Civil
like
Service
this.
Commission po,
It
kailangan
was
po
stupid.
nating i-amend.
Hold on.
Na
This
yung sinasabi
is
na
stupid.
6713,
To heck with
yung
it.
Code of
I'm
Conduct
not
and
landing
Ethical
those
Standards
troops.
of Public
I'm not
Officials.
going to be the one who starts
Halimbawa
a
po yung
war.
Section 8.
Dati, puno ito.
Lagyan natin ng provision that the public has the right to know the assets, liabilities, net worth, and financial and business interests of any public official or employee, including those of their spouses or unmarried children under 18. Ito pa po importante dyan. However, public access of these SAL-N documents remain limited. Sa ngayon, kaya pinopropose natin that the SAL-N of members of Congress be made available to the public through the official website of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Para sa ganun, makuha nyo na kagad, hindi susulat ka pa. Kung ayaw niya, hindi mo rin makukuha. Very, very limited ang access po ninyo. Pang-14, i-abolish po natin yung River Basin Control Office. Ito po yung parkingan po ng mga pinoplot ng mga opisyalis na wala namang ginagawa. Isip-isipin po ninyo, 2006 na gawa itong opisinang ito under the DNR. Siya ang dapat mag-integrate ng ating 18 existing river basins in this country. Wala silang nagawa kahit isa. Huwag pang wawaldas lang ng panang ng sweldo. Nagsusweldo na walang ginagawa. Ito po yung gusto namin gawin. After 3 hearings, 14 na po ang measures na naisip namin na dapat nating isulong para sa ganun itong mga nangyayari nito. Kahit papano, ma-address na po natin.
Ito si Senator Ping na imbes sa WTP, why don't we consider legislative immunity daw po muna para pwede pa rin mag-tell all the Discayas and other witnesses pero hindi magagamit to laban sa kanila.
Sayang naman yung batas. Ba't natin ginawa yung batas kung hindi natin? Okay lang yung sinasabi niya. Pero ito, batas na ito. Wala namang kasigurahan yung legislative custody. Samantalang ito batas na umiiral, ba't hindi natin paganahin?
Nabanggit ko kanina na hindi lang po sa cloud ng trabaho yung pag-determine kung nagsasabi ng totoo o hindi yung witness. Then bakit po na contempt si Bryce Hernandez tsaka yung iba pang witness before? Hindi nagsasabi ng totoo.
Kasi yung kay Bryce Hernandez, meron kaming dokumento na binigay mismo ng Okada. Yung pinatalo niyang pera, napakarami. Merong 14 million, merong 15 million. Tapos meron siyang ginagamit na isang ID na in-issue ng LTO. Litrato niya pero ibang pangalan. So, sinasabi namin, hindi ba ikaw ito? Ito yung ipinanalo mo, ito yung pinatalo mo eh. Wala po akong alam dyan. Hindi ko po pera yan. Kapag ako po yung naglalaro, ang nagbibigay po ng pera yung boss ko, yung Alcantara. Ito yung pambabastos na sa harap namin. Nandito na yung katwiran eh. Yung kay Diskaya, lumabas siyang mag-isa. Hindi ko anticipated kung ano yung nilalaman ng kanyang ano eh. I have no right to judge. Sabi ko nga sa inyo, pag natapos na lahat ng investigasyon, isa yun, maring iba pa ang lilitaw. Sa korte na po, gagamitin po lahat yun. And the court is the proper place para i-determine po yung veracity or otherwise nung kanyang paglalahad.
Sen, so what do you make of the allegation of Bryce Hernandez na may mga senador na tumanggap din po ng kickback from the flood control projects?
Ang pagkakaiba kasi, ayokong i-judge din yun. Ang sasabihin ko lang sa inyo, nung lumabas yung mag-asawang Diskaya, it was in response dun sa aking ipinload nung second hearing na, kayo po, tulungan nyo kami. Baka gusto nyo magsabi na ng totoo, ang may papangako namin sa inyo, merong tayong batas na maaaring mag-cover sa inyo. You take advantage of this. Isipin po ninyo kako sapagkat maaring maharap kayo sa plunder kung sakasakaling dumating ang panahon, ito po ay may latag lahat sa korte. Baka po kako maging maganda para sa inyo. Walang madali. Pare-parehong mahirap to. Ngunit makakapamili kayo, maaring makaiwas kayo sa criminal prosecution. Maaring ang gawin na lang ng gobyerno ay civil liability na lang. So, in response to that, parang in-explore naming possibility, may lumabas nga. Ito nga yung Diskaya. Ang totoo nun, mayroon pa nga gustong magsalita pa, pero ang sabi ko nga sa kanila, mag-unahan kayo. Kasi kung halimbawa, ma-establish na namin na ito'y sapat na, hindi na namin kailangan yung iba, di ba? Kasi isa sa mga requirements ay yung masasubstantiate yung mga in material points, lahat ng mga premises. Kung na-establish na halimbawa sa magitan nito, kalabisan na yung iba pa. Kaya namin pinload yun. Ngayon, yung paglabas ni Diskaya, wala siyang, hindi siya under custody eh. Di ba? So, inaakala namin, voluntary talaga. Tsaka sumulat siya sa akin, talaga bang voluntaryo? Inamin niyang voluntaryo sa sarili nila na gumawa ng pagsasalaysay. Samantalang si Bryce Hernandez, under sa custody na siya ng Senate eh. Sa palagay mo, voluntary pa yon? Ako sa akin lang, gusto kong ibalik sa inyo, voluntaryo pa ba yung kaya ka, nandun ka na eh, gigisain ka na naman ng House of Representatives eh. At meron nga mga nag-text sa akin na mga ibang tao na tumutulong sa ibang mga partido. Meron daw mga congressman doon na nagsabi o nagsasuggest, maglaglag ka na rin ng mga senador para hindi kayo makontempt. So, malalagay sila sa pressure eh. So, kung tatanungin mo ako, palagay nyo ba kapanipaniwala? Hindi ko alam. Pero kayo ang makakapagsabi, alin ang mas magandang sworn statement? Yung hindi ka pa under custody o yung under custody ka na? Doon masasalamin mo ngayon kung alin ang mas voluntaryo. Alin ang mas totoo.
Sir, hindi ba, Senator, mahalaga din yung ma-determine yung credibility ng isang nag-a-apply na witness? For example, itong Diskaya, si Sara Diskaya, puting asawa niya, they have been denying before that they own more than one company. Sabi nila yung Alpha and Omega lang yung kumpanya nila. Pero later on sa Blue Ribbon, inamin po nila na siyam yung pagmamayari nilang kumpanya.
Alam mo, yun nga ang korte nang magdidetermine nun later on. Kami, nahangga lamang kami doon sa paggawa ng batas sapagkat ang aming direction is always in aid of legislation. Gusto kong malaman ninyo, there is a distinction between police investigation at saka yung investigation in aid of legislation. Ayokong magbigay ng insinuation dyan, but hindi ako marunong sa police investigation dahil hindi ako police.
Hi sir, Daniel po from PTV4.
Yes.
Sir, ano po yung any thoughts lang siguro or nilook forward nyo dun sa tinayo po na Independent Commission for Infrastructure?
Ateneo, ano yun?
Independent Commission po.
Yung ICI? Wala naman akong... baka sakaling makatulong naman yon, bakit hindi? Ang gusto ko lang sanang makita ninyo, lalo na kayong mga members ng media, kailangan mag-fit sila dun sa tinatawag na Independent Commission. Sino yung magiging opisyal na hihirangin na magko-compose ng Independent Commission? How independent can they be? Yung probity na hinahanap, wala ba silang kulay politika? Sila ba ay magpapahayag na kahit kailan hindi sila tatakbo sa opisinang pampolitika? Para sa ganon ay yung gagawin nila ay talagang independent of anything para paniwalaan. Kasi yun ang importante, kailangang paniwalaan. Pagkatapos, are they competent na makita ito? Gaano katagal? Kasi ang pinag-uusapan natin, kailangan matigil na kagad ito eh. Kung ang pag-uusapan natin ay yung ilang taon pa atras, baka mamaya makonsume na tayo lahat. Hindi ba dapat merong immediate na gagawin dito? Kaya nga yung sa amin, in aid of legislation, kailangang mailatag kaagad. Yung mga batas na kailangan, ma-address natin kaagad. Lamang, ang problema kapag ka-legislation, medyo matagal nga rin. Pero pagsikapan po natin, nabilisan, mapast-track natin, given the extent and magnitude of the problem ahead of us.
Hi, Sen. In relation to his question po, sabi ni Senate Minority Leader Alan Cayetano po, magkakaroon daw po ng meeting ang Minority Bloc regarding po dyan sa pag-support po sa Independent Commission. At sabi po ni Senator Alan, susuportahan lang daw po yun kung, yung mga tinalagang miyembro ay malaya sa impluensya ng politika at malalaking negosyo. Kayo po, Sen, would you support the creation po ng Independent Commission for Infrastructure po?
I will support the creation of that commission. Ang sabi ko nga, yung kailangan siyang maging independent talaga. Kagaya ng ipinahayag ni Minority Leader Alan Cayetano, tama lang talaga na makita talagang independent sila para maging malinaw, katanggap-tanggap yung resulta ng kanilang investigation. Otherwise, malalagay na naman tayo dun sa kalagayan na ipagkikibit-balikat lang sapagkat napolitika na naman tayo.
Nag-meeting na po ba ang Minority Bloc o magmi-meeting pa lang po para pag-usapan po yan?
Nakita ko sa thread, magmi-meeting pa lang kami. Pupunta ako mamaya. Parang lunch yata eh. Pero quick lunch lang kasi kailangan namin makabalik dahil may session, hindi ba?
Sir Mav Gonzalez po, GMA. Sir, may we get your comment lang po, ibabalik na daw po sa Senate si Bryce.
Ano ka mo?
Ibabalik na po sa Senado si Bryce.
Oh, hindi maganda. Talaga naman dito siya dapat eh.
Sir, what do you think prompted this? What do you think prompted this po?
Hindi ko alam. Baka naisip nila na talagang dapat sa Senado talaga.
Sir, good morning po. Asher Kadapan Jr. from UNTV. Sir, tanong lang, ano po yung recommendation na dapat na maging direction po ng Blue Ribbon Committee investigating the anomalous flood control project? Nakausap niyo na po ba si Senator Ping about it?
Ano yung huling tanong mo?
Nakausap niyo na po si Senator Lacson about it? Direction po lang.
Kailangan ba kaming mag-usap? Kasi sila nga yung nagsasabi na mali daw ang direction ko. Baka sila yung tama yung direction. Tingnan na lang natin, di ba? Hindi ko kasi alam kung bakit sinabi ni SP Soto na tingin namin mali yung direction. Marami raw dissatisfied sa mga kasama namin. Sino kaya yung kasama namin dissatisfied? Baka si House Speaker Romualdez lang ang dissatisfied doon sa paraan ng aming pag-imbestiga. Sabi ko nga sa inyo, committee investigation is not police investigation. Hindi yung nag-iimbestiga na pagkatapos meron pang separate investigation. Sa aking palagay ay hindi sana nangyari yun. Merong lugar dito, meron sa Arayat, meron sa Nauhan, Mindoro, meron sa ganito. Bakit pa isa-isang ganon? Ano ba yun? Meron ng Blue Ribbon Committee. Ba't kinakailangan magsagawa pa ng individual investigation ang bawat isa sa amin? Meron naman kaming Blue Ribbon. What does that suggest to you? Kasi sa House of Representatives na kung saan nagtagal ako, pagka yung isang subject matter tinitake up na sa committee, wala nang nagpe-privilege speech. At least sa House of Representatives. Sa Senate siguro baka wala namang rules na gano'n. Pero sa tingin ko, kahit na walang rules dito, pagka tinitake up na sa Blue Ribbon Committee, I think the common decency requires na wala na dapat yun. Kasi parang nagpapaligsahan. Hindi maganda.
Sen, last lang na po sa akin. Bukod po sa pagkompronta, sabi niyo kay SOJ Remulla, meron po ba kayong ibang mga plano pang gawin to pursue providing protection sa mga diskaya, or are you still going to pursue it?
Yun lang ang alam ko kasi yun ang nasa batas lang eh. Kasi baka kung meron pa akong gagawin, sasabihin nila, kinakatigan siya o inaapoyohan. Ayaw kong isipin ninyo na meron akong kinakampihan dito. As chairman, kailangan maging neutral ka eh. Alam mo yung problema ko nung nag-hearing ako sa Blue Ribbon? Ang problema ko yung mga kasama ko nga. Kung paano ko mamamanage yung time. Lahat gustong magsalita. Walang focus, di ba? Halimbawa, ang tinutukoy ng isa dito, pagkatapos magsasalita yung isa, doon ang tanong niya. So, yun pala yung nakita ko. Yun pala yung pinakamahirap na challenge para sa akin. Hindi yung pagtatanong mismo o kung paano mo i-manage ang mga kasama mo. Kasi iba't iba yung pinanggagalingan nila. Kaya kung iisipin mo, kung kailangan maging focus kayo dahil kukunti yung panahon, medyo hirap ka pagka yun ang issue.
Sir, Mary Reyes from One News One PH po. Over the weekend po, meron pong umuugong na may kudeta daw po laban kay SP Soto. May nagsasabi rin po galing daw po sa Duterte Block yung move na to. Your comments po?
Hindi ko naman alam yan. Hindi naman ako chismoso.
Pero Sen, wala po bang kuda na nabubuo po ba ngayon o may info po ba kayo?
Ako wala, baka ikaw meron. Sabihin mo nga sa akin.
Chika na lang po tayo. Thank you, Sen.
Sir, sabi niyo mahirap yung pag-manage nung kayo ay Blue Ribbon.
Nakita mo naman di ba?
Yes, sir.
Meron kang pinupunto dito, tapos biglang sasabihin siya, ang pinakamahirap dito biglang may mag-i-intervene. Mr. Chair, may I intervene? Of course, yung papayagan ako. Yun ang marami. Kaya kung minsan may nagseselos, ikaw kanya, hindi ka naman fair salita na salita. Paano mong gagawin? Nang-intervene ito, papayagan mo pagkatapos. Tapos yan naman, nandun pa siya rito. Naku, hirap na hirap ka talaga doon.
So sir, nakahinga ba kayo ng maluwag na hindi na kayo yung chair or would you have wanted to stay as the chairman of Blue Ribbon po?
Ito yung una mong tanong, nakaluwag-luwag, talagang lumuwag. Nung ako'y pinalitan na, yung paghiga ko sa kama, nakatulog agad ako.
So ayaw nyo na rin, sir? Or would you have wanted to stay, sir, as the chair?
Siyempre, kung ako yun, mandato yun ang tungkulin natin. Hindi naman tayo umaatras sa tungkulin. Diba? Okay, salamat sa inyong lahat. Hanggang sa susunod na pagkakataon.
Eat your Cheese Whiz para strong. Cheese Whiz for the strength to do more.
Vicks Vapo Drops Lozenges. Its mentholated Vicks vapors help to relieve sore throat and cough.
So, in the course of